This video will help you understand how 529 to Roth IRA transfers work. If you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Dime. I'm a certified financial planner out of Edmonds, Washington, and I specialize in working with folks to and through retirement. At the end of 2022, the Secure Act 2.0 passed, which added some provisions permitting the rollover of 529 assets to Roth IRAs. And there's some rules and regulations that go along with that starting in 2024. And so in today's video, we'll cover some of the ins and outs, as well as the strategies to consider if you're thinking about starting a 529 or you currently have a 529 on the balance sheet. So let's jump in. One of the biggest concerns for clients is on passing assets to the next generation in the most appropriate vehicles possible. And of course, you can just leave an inheritance at death to your loved ones. You could make outright gifts of cash to the next generation. You could move things into a trust for multiple beneficiaries to enjoy the benefits of and move that to an irrevocable trust outside of your estate. And there's also easier strategies such as funding a UTMA or funding a 529 plan. One of the biggest concerns with clients when it comes to funding a 529 plan, which for a quick refresher are those education-only oriented investment accounts that you fund with after-tax dollars. The money then grows and compounds inside the 529 plan without capital gains taxes. And then if you use those assets for education-oriented expenses, you can withdraw that amount of money from the 529 tax-free, income tax-free, and penalty tax-free. One of the biggest concerns with clients when funding a 529 plan is the concern that if the assets get too large and they're not going to be used for education expenses for one reason or another, that the client would then have to take out a non-qualified distribution, which comes with a whole host of very hefty taxes, including penalty taxes. And so to avoid that, some clients are concerned that even by starting a 529 plan, the assets will get too large and they will go unused. Now, it's a good problem to have if the assets inside the 529 get too large, that education is fully funded or wasn't needed, and now there's just extra assets sitting on the balance sheet. But there still are some options to consider if you do end up in this situation. As it stands right now, there are rules that allow 529 owners to change the beneficiary of a particular 529 plan. So if kiddo number one isn't going to use all their 529 assets, you are permitted as the account owner to roll over or move a portion or all of that 529 money to another beneficiary. Now that other beneficiary has to be considered a qualified family member, and there's some rules that define that, things like, kids, grandkids, siblings, parents, that kind of stuff, all staying within sort of the nucleus family. Now there are some potential tax consequences to moving 529 beneficiaries down a generation or two. We'll have to talk about that another time, but just know that it's not necessarily just free and clear just to change beneficiaries down a generation. There also is a cool provision in the 529 plans that essentially say if this kiddo qualifies for some type of scholarship, the 529 plan will permit you to withdraw out of the 529 plan the dollar value equivalent of that scholarship, and you won't owe any 10% penalty taxes on that withdrawal. Now you'll still owe income taxes on the growth for whatever portion of the 529 you pull out because you benefited from tax deferral. The IRS still wants to tax you on that, but there's no additional 10% penalty tax. But the purpose of today's video is to talk about the new Secure Act 2.0 permission that allows people to roll 529 assets into Roth IRAs for those beneficiaries. No penalty taxes, no income taxes included. This brings some peace of mind in case, accumulating too much in a 529 asset is a concern of yours. There are some rules that allow you to start converting 529 assets over to Roth IRA assets, but there are some limitations, so we'll cover those real quick. And then we'll talk about some strategies to consider if you find yourself in this situation of having a 529 or thinking about starting one. So the first biggest limitation is, as of 2024, the lifetime rollover maximum, aka the maximum amount that you could ever roll from a 529 over to a Roth IRA for that beneficiary, is $35,000. Is that going to go up with inflation in the future? Probably. That's what I would imagine as 35 grand becomes less and less worth 35 grand in the future. But for now, 35 grand is the maximum one can roll over during one's lifetime. Another important provision, which we'll get more clarity on in just a quick second, is that the child or whoever's doing these rollovers needs to have earned income. You can't do 529 to Roth IRA rollovers if the person you're rolling over for has no earned income. Probably implied here, but I'll clarify. The rollover from the 529 to the Roth IRA has to be for the same beneficiary. So if I'm the account owner of my child's 529, I can't roll their 529 assets over to my personal Roth IRA. I'd have to establish a Roth IRA for them. And if they're a minor, you'd set up a minor Roth IRA. And you'd move their 529 assets, because they're the beneficiary of the 529, over to their Roth IRA. There's no commingling of 529 for junior over to dad's Roth IRA or vice versa. Now, if the owner and the beneficiary of the 5 to 9 is that kiddo, that's totally fine. Then they would just set up their own Roth IRA and rock and roll. Normally though, the parent is the 5 to 9 owner and the beneficiary is one of the kiddos. One important rule is what we'll call the 15-year rule. And that essentially means that the 5 to 9 plan must have been established for 15 years before you can start doing 5 to 9 to Roth IRA rollovers. So let's say you open the account when they're born, you're making contributions or whatever, and it's been 15 years. The earliest age you'd ever see a 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversion would be age 15, 16. So if you see anybody doing that younger, or you're asking questions about that in the comments, most likely that's a straight up no-go. One potential exception to the age 15, 16 ruling is whether or not when the beneficiary is changed from one 5 to 9 beneficiary to another, if that second beneficiary is allowed to tag along for the ride of however long the first beneficiary had the 5 to 9 plan for. Said another way, if kiddo number 1 has the account open for 10 years and then mom and dad change the beneficiary to kiddo number 2, does kiddo number 2 need to wait another 15 years? Or do they only need to wait 5 years for a total 5 to 9 account waiting period of 15 years? We're unsure on that, because theoretically that means once one kiddo is 10 years old and they change the beneficiary to their newborn and that newborn waits 5 years, then could the newborn start doing Roth to 5 to 9 conversions at the age of 5? My gut is saying probably not. There's probably a reason the IRS wants everybody waiting until age 15, 16. So more clarity on that's needed. For now though, the safest assumption is just to plan on needing to have the 5 to 9 for each beneficiary open for 15 years. The next rule to be aware of is what we'll call the 5-year rule. And that essentially just means that any contributions that were made to the 5 to 9 plan in the past 5 years are ineligible to be included in the 5 to 9 to Roth IRA rollovers. Said another way, if you put $1 into the 5 to 9 plan 15 years ago, and then today you're gonna lump sum in 35 grand and then start doing Roth to 5 to 9 conversions, that wouldn't be permitted. You'd have to wait 5 years for that 35 grand you just deposited to season, for lack of a better term, over the next 5 years. Now, if you've been making periodic contributions in roughly the same amount for the past 15 years, then this really shouldn't be an issue. It mostly just pertains to people wanting to make large lump sums and then immediately start 5 to 9 to Roth IRA converting. These next two pieces are pretty important, so we'll highlight them. The first one is going to be on the rollover amount per year. The rollover amount per year that you're maximally allowed to convert is the IRA contribution limit for that tax year. So for 2023, the IRA out-of-pocket funding maximum is $6,500 for those under the age of 50, which means that even if you had $1 million in a 5 to 9 plan, the maximum you'd be able to convert on an annual basis is $6,500. Also, that $6,500 that you convert is decreased dollar for dollar by however much that kiddo funds into their Roth IRA themselves. So for example, if I do a 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversion of $6,000, that means I can only out of pocket contribute to my Roth IRA with $500 to reach a total IRA maximum contribution of $6,500. And for those of you who are quick on the math, at least for 2023's numbers of $6,500, it would take 6 years at $6,500 a year to fully convert the maximum permitted lifetime 5 to 9 to Roth IRA rollover amount of $35,000. And so for some simple math here, if you start a 5 to 9 plan when your kiddo was born, and you put $1,000 a year in for 15 years, and we'll just say you earn 10% in returns over that time period. After about 15 years, you'll have $32,000 roughly in this 5 to 9 plan. At which point, if you start doing 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversions and it takes you 6 years, that's probably the maximum you'd want to fund on an annual basis to a 5 to 9 plan. If your plan was to Roth convert all of that when the child hits 16 and then for the next, following 5 years of conversions. Now, whether or not you should put in more or less than $1,000 a year, that's up to you and your financial planning. But at a minimum, if you're trying to maximize this strategy, $1,000 a year is probably what you want to shoot for. The last nugget to be aware of that's pretty unique, rollovers are not subject to the modified adjusted gross income levels that are subject for Roth IRA contributions. Said another way, if I make $1 million a year, I can't go out and directly fund a Roth IRA. My income's too high from a modified adjusted gross income level. But there are no modified adjusted gross income limitations for doing 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversions. As long as I have enough earned income to justify a 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversion, then I am permitted to convert the IRA maximum of $6,500. Now, in order to do a 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversion, the kiddo must have enough earned income to justify that. So at an IRA maximum contribution of $6,500, the kiddo must have at least $6,500 of compensation for that tax year in order to justify a full $6,500 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversion. But if that kiddo was making $1 million a year, they could still do 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversions. They just wouldn't be able to make direct IRA or direct Roth IRA contributions. The modified adjusted gross income levels are too high. For a quick refresher, in 2023, if you're single, roughly 150 grand is the maximum modified adjusted gross income level you can have before you're not allowed to put anything inside of a Roth IRA directly. And for married folks, that level is around 230 grand. So if you're less than those thresholds, you could probably put something into a Roth IRA, if not the full $6,500. If you're above those thresholds, you won't be able to put anything into a Roth IRA from contributions. Those are some of the rules. Now that we have those first principles knocked out, let's talk about some strategies. And specifically, these are strategies to avoid paying income taxes and penalty taxes on non-qualified education expenses. So the simplest one that folks might be curious about is that if you have no intention of funding your kiddo's education via a 5 to 9 plan, it probably is not going to make sense to set up one just for the idea that in the future you're going to be doing 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversions. Generally, the math does not make sense to start up and fund a 5 to 9 plan so that in 16 years you can do 5 to 9 to Roth IRA rollovers. There are far more flexible and simple ways of accumulating wealth for your kiddo outside of a 5 to 9 plan that they can use when they're older. Because remember, you can only do rollovers when the child has enough earned income to justify that level of rollover. And if the child has enough income to justify a $6,500 5 to 9 to Roth IRA rollover, then that's enough compensation to justify them directly just funding a Roth IRA. And they're mutually exclusive. If they directly fund $6,500, they can't 5 to 9 to Roth IRA rollover $6,500. So the kiddo would need to make a decision as soon as they're starting to earn income. Do I do a 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversion and not fund my Roth IRA this year? Or do I fund my Roth IRA this year and let my 5 to 9 plan continue to compound, which is the whole thing I'm trying to avoid anyways because I don't need it anymore for education. Also, with the gifting limits at $17,000 per person per donee for 2023, it's a lot more compelling just to plan on gifting the child $34,000 whenever you want them to have that money, rather than 15 years ago making $1,000 a year contributions to a 5 to 9 plan, earning 10%, and then having them do all this, underwater chess to figure out the best way to either fund their Roth IRA or do a 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversion and forego funding their Roth IRA. It's probably going to be just a lot simpler just to stroke them a check for 34 grand when they're 18. So general guidance, I would not set up a 5 to 9 plan if you don't actually have any intentions on funding education with that 5 to 9 plan. Now, as always, there's probably a couple of situations out there where it would make sense to set up and fund a 5 to 9 plan at that $1,000 a year mark, whether or not you plan to actually use it for education. The most notable situation is if you forecast that kiddo earning income and immediately earning too much money to fund a Roth IRA directly. Because remember, if the child makes too much money from a modified adjusted gross income standpoint to directly fund a Roth IRA, they can still do 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversions. They just can't directly fund the Roth IRA. So said another way, if day one, Junior is going to be making $1 million a year, then Junior can't fund a Roth IRA. But Junior could do 5 to 9 to Roth IRA conversions at $6,500 a year over 6 years and fully roll over his 5 to 9 to Roth IRA. Now, we all want our kiddos to do very well and we want them to be super successful, but personally that sounds like quite a bit of crystal balling that 16 years from now or later, immediately when my kid enters the workforce or shortly thereafter, they're going to be making too much to even directly fund a Roth IRA. So unless you directly control their salary by way of the family business, I probably would look at a different method of building wealth for the kiddo. Now, one other situation that I guess could make sense to where it might be cool to fund a 5 to 9 plan that you don't actually plan to use for education is simply to let the parents have more control over the assets past when the child reaches the age of majority. So other accounts like minor IRAs or UTMAs all give the child unfettered access to these funds when they reach that state's age of majority, 18, 21, etc. However, a 5 to 9 plan that's owned by the parents, even though the kiddo is the beneficiary, is still retained in full control by the parents. And so if for whatever reason, Junior isn't as sophisticated with financial stuff as the parents were planning on, if they have the money inside of a 5 to 9, as opposed to have been making direct contributions to, say, like a UTMA account that he would have access to when he hits 18 to 21, they have more control if the assets are held inside of a 5 to 9 plan. They could decide at some point, you know what, Junior, you're a good steward with your finances. here we want you to start doing 529 to Roth IRA rollovers. Or they could say, or probably wouldn't say, hey, you're not as sophisticated with money as we thought you were. We're going to give this to your sister, or we're going to give this to the grandkids, or whatever. If that is a concern, however, I don't know if I would advise even setting up a 529 plan in the first place. I probably would have just retained those assets inside of a family joint investment account or something else that's a little bit simpler to manage and it keeps your options a little bit more open. Because again, the whole thing we want to avoid here is taking out a non-qualified distribution from the 529 plan if they go unused. And those taxes are very expensive, whereas capital gains taxes, especially long-term capital gains taxes, if the parents just retain owning these assets inside their joint investment account, for example, those long-term capital gains taxes are a lot less than income taxes plus 10% in penalty taxes. So what about if you've already established a 529 plan? Well, if you plan on using the 529 for education, then you don't even need to worry about any of this kind of stuff. But let's say you started a 529 plan and the prospects aren't high that you're going to need it for education. For one reason or another, you are forecasting that you're going to have excess 529 plans in an account you already started. Maybe the simplest answer is just to look into doing 529 to Roth IRA conversions when the kid starts earning income. And maybe they forego funding their Roth IRA and maybe they save that elsewhere, but you permit them to do 529 to Roth IRA conversions. And you do it over 6 years and then your 529 plan is totally absorbed. Now, if your 529 is approaching that lifetime conversion maximum of 35 grand, then you might want to look into some other strategies, such as splitting the 529 plan up amongst different beneficiaries, maybe splitting it down the middle, and then both of those beneficiaries could look into doing 529 to Roth IRA conversions if they have earned income. Or as part of a greater estate planning agenda, let's say you have 529 monies and then non-529 monies like cash or an investment account or whatever. You could look into gifting these assets ahead of time and prioritizing gifting the 529 monies to the higher earners as opposed to gifting them investment accounts. And that's because if they're higher earners, then they are going to probably be disqualified from directly funding a Roth IRA. But if now they're the beneficiary of a 529 plan, they could look into doing 529 to Roth IRA conversions because their income's too high to directly fund a Roth IRA, but it's never too high to be doing 529 to Roth IRA rollovers. And then of course you gift the non-529 money over to the lower earning income folks who probably still have the ability to directly fund a Roth IRA. And let's not forget, you could always just roll the 529 beneficiary over to yourself. If you're the owner of the account, then you can start doing 529 to Roth IRA rollovers. Let's say Junior doesn't need the money and you forecast you might be a little bit short on your own retirement and 35 grand would make a lot of sense towards padding that flexibility. Maybe move the 529 to yourself and look to do 529 to Roth IRA rollovers. So calls to action wise, I would say if you forecast having excess 529 monies inside these plans, I would recommend creating a proactive strategy with your financial team to discuss the efficacy of different movements, either among various beneficiaries or amongst yourself in doing 529 to Roth IRA rollovers. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have further questions, drop them in the comments below or get in touch on the website. We'll help you get squared away. Have an awesome rest of your week. Talk to you later. Bye.